All right. Well, as we continue the mission of God for the family, and we're talking about parenting like God, we talked about confession yesterday. Today, I want to talk about imitation. Parenting is about imitation, and we have talked a little bit about imitation in the family and how that functions. And the reality is, uh, in our life as a parent, our kids are going to imitate us more than they're going to simply learn information, right? They are going to learn information and we're going to tell them things and we're going to talk about um, some of the ways that we teach them um, and train them on purpose, purposefully train our kids to do what's right. But they're also going to imitate us. And what's great is that's a that's a good thing. That's a good way that God set up the world. And but a big part of that is because He has made us as people that can imitate Him and parenting. So a lot of parenting is about us imitating God as our kids imitate us. Paul, he mentions this when he's talking about, um, uh, follow me as I've followed Christ. But he a number of times mentions how being an apostle or being a church planter is like being a parent. And then he says, "Now follow me the way I follow Christ." And but in Luke, Jesus also says this when he says, just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise. And he talks about imitating God at the end of this statement. But this is how he describes it. He says, "If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those that love them." Now, this applies to parenting because our kids don't come out. Our kids don't always act the way they should, respect us the way they should, right? And he says, if you wait around to love your kids for when they respect you, what credit is that to you as a parent? If you wait around and you're loving and merciful towards them when they are obedient, then what credit is that to you as a parent, right? He says, for even sinners love those who love them. But if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. That if you lend to those from whom you hope to receive back, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive back, on interest. But love your enemies, do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return, for your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. Right? He's talking about family resemblance with God the Father. This is what God the Father is like, and he's talking about a, having a family resemblance to God the Father. For he is kind to the unthankful and evil. Right now, being able to call my kids unthankful is not hard, right? We see that all of the time, right? That unthankful is a good description of little kids. They don't know to be thankful. You have to train them to be thankful. You have to teach them, but but you but a big part of it is you teach them to be thankful by being thankful. But when they're unthankful, the way that we imitate God is through kindness. So he says, therefore, be merciful just as your Father is also merciful. How is God a parent? Well, he's kind and he's merciful. Uh, and and he says this is a family resemblance type of issue. So the way that things go when everything is going smoothly isn't usually going to be the thing that your kids look back on and is say, well, it was really formative. Is all of the times when it didn't go well, right? The times that are really formative are the ones when something doesn't go well, or they're unthankful, or they're unkind, or they do the wrong thing, and then we show them kindness and mercy, right? And sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes you fail and you have to ask for forgiveness later. And but the we there was I remember one time in particular, one of my kids was just really struggling. The teenager struggling to do their homework, had no desire to do it, didn't want to do it, and was saying, "I'm actually just not going to do it." And um, and I had he came into the room right at that moment, and he and my wife were having uh, a sort of an argument. It wasn't really an argument because my wife wasn't arguing, um, but was insisting, no, we're gonna get this started, and you're gonna do it. And he, or this child, was just saying, no, I'm not. And um, and as I walked over, my wife was like, I got it, and I was like, no, it's okay. I'm gonna take this one. And she, and she had told me later that she was worried that I was going to get angry. Now I have gotten angry at the kids in the past, and I've had to ask for forgiveness for that. So it's not completely uh, unknown to my kids for me to get angry with them about something, especially uh, stubbornness. And that's because I'm really frustrated at me about my own stubbornness, and I see it reflected in them. And so I've tried to explain this to them, but it's still hurts when your dad is angry at you. um, but they've, I've confessed and been forgiven and all that. But um, in this particular uh, moment, I sat down with him and just said, tell me what's going on. And he told me what was going on. And I was able to keep my composure, and we talked through it. And at the end, he said, okay, I'm going to try and get started. And then as soon as he got started, his frustration about things went away, and he was able to finish it really quickly. And um, and a couple of months later, it came up, and he said um, that the that the uh, the reflection to him of what was going on came because of that moment of having somebody merciful sit down and have mercy towards his, he, kind of being a butt, right? And he and then he could see what he was doing in that moment, and he was saying it, he was talking. And rarely do you actually get your kid rarely do your kids later say, you know, this is what happened in that moment. But he had had a particular good moment of self-reflection after that. And uh, that moment of his sin flipped and ended up becoming a blessing because of this merciful moment. And I what it made me think of was how many of those that I miss. Now God is merciful and He is kind, and so I missed a lot of opportunities to reflect to himself, to help him see himself by being merciful and kind, because of all of the times that I would get frustrated, right? And every time that I got frustrated and didn't respond the way Jesus talks about here, uh, if you love those who love you, what credit is it to you? Right? Sinners love, but if you do good to those, uh, or he says, but if you're merciful to the unthankful, right? The way God is, if you're kind to the unthankful, um, you're missing, or when you don't do that, you're missing moments to help them see themselves and become more self-reflective. And I'd realized I'd missed a lot of those. Now God is kind. God is his God, has a story for him, and that's all a part of the story for him, where God is digging those wells of mercy, and he's digging down to the good to the good water through even the sin of his parents towards him. Right? So we can trust that God is doing that. But you want to have what Jesus says here is those opportunities to be like God to them, the way God is to us, kind and merciful, even when we're unthankful. And because what Jesus says is, for with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you, right? Um, uh, Give, it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your bosom, right? That God will always outgive us, right? So he says, forgive. You've been forgiven. Forgive and you will be forgiven, right? Jesus says all of these sorts of things. Uh, Condemn not, you will not be condemned, right? That there is a way of living that creates a a society of no condemnation, a society of forgiveness, a society of uh, uh, generosity, right? And that's what we're trying to do in our families is turn them into societies of generosity, societies of forgiveness, societies of that have no condemnation, and that starts by us leading the way in that. So um, I hope it's helpful to hear about some of my failures, and so that hopefully you can learn from them. Um, but one of the biggest things that I've learned is to ask myself over and over and over how you it I mean it was trivialized into what would Jesus do, but what kind of parent has God been to me, right? What kind of parent has God been to me? And the trivialization, what would Jesus do, actually isn't a bad question to ask. The reason, and I heard somebody say, "Oh, that's a terrible question to ask," because nobody, most people don't read their Bible, so they don't really know what Jesus is like, so they shouldn't be asking that question. I was like, well, there's actually a better solution to that, which is get to know Jesus, get to know what Jesus is like, and then what would Jesus do becomes a huge blessing, right? So, and but we're told specifically to think, what kind of father is God, and how do I become like that? And when Jesus tells us to do that, he says uh, that mercy, being being loving or kind instead of condemning, and being generous, right? That those are the marks that he gives us of what God is like as a father, and then we can imitate that and become a blessing to our kids. So um, yesterday we talked about confession, and today talking about uh, mercy and kindness and the importance of it. And we're going to continue talking about what does it look to parent like God does, and just keep working through these details.